Penguin Random House Audio presents Tax-Free Income for Life, a step-by-step plan for a secure retirement by David Mcknight. Read for you by Marc Cashman. Forward. David Mcknight doesn't have a crystal ball, but he can see the future. He sees the consequences of unfunded liabilities for programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and government pensions, and knows that someday soon that massive bill will come due. Because of recent events, that day of reckoning will come even sooner than you think. As I write this, Congress just passed a $2 trillion stimulus package in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Word is, even more stimulus bills are in the works. And how is all this spending going to be financed? You guessed it, even more debt. Folks, the tax freight train that is bearing down on your retirement plan just picked up a little more speed. Who's going to pay this tax bill when it arrives? Billionaires? Major corporations? Nope. It's going to be everyday Americans like you and me. You may think you know how much is in your 401k or IRA, but unless you can predict what tax rates will be when you take that money out, you don't really know how much money you will have. Let's face it, if you have a tax-deferred retirement account, you are in a partnership with the federal government, and they get to determine how much you get to spend in retirement. For years, David has been crisscrossing the country, warning everyday Americans about the tax freight train bearing down on them and the importance of investing in tax-free accounts. I got to know David during the filming of Doug Orchard's documentary, The Power of Zero, The Tax Train is Coming. If you haven't seen that movie, I recommend it to you. Economists from the most prestigious universities across the country share their research on our country's growing debt crisis and its impact on future tax rates. I have personally moved more of my wealth to tax-free accounts, including life insurance, because of David's message about the dangers of higher taxes. In Tax-Free Income for Life, David raises a warning cry about a second risk I've been telling Americans about my entire career: longevity risk. This risk is so insidious because it magnifies all the other risks you'll be facing in retirement: sequence of return risk, withdrawal rate risk, long-term care risk, and inflation risk. When it comes to sound retirement planning, you can't just think about market returns. You have to start managing longevity risk. The antidote to longevity risk is guaranteed lifetime inflation-adjusted income. Look, I've been studying lifetime income for 30 years and have written 5 books about the subject. And here's what the math and science show. A successful retirement is not about asset allocation, diversification, or rates of return. That was critical during your accumulation phase. During your retirement years, it's all about covering basic lifestyle expenses with guaranteed inflation-adjusted income designed to last for the rest of your life. In retirement, it's not about assets. It's about income. Folks, a successful retirement is rarely a do-it-yourself project. So take the time to listen to this book and meet with a qualified, experienced financial professional. By making a few simple tweaks to your portfolio now, you can reduce your future tax bill and make sure your retirement income lasts for the rest of your life. Tom Mcknight, author, speaker, economist, PBS host, www.tommcknight.com, March 26, 2020. Chapter 1. The 2 Great Retirement Risks. You've invested diligently your entire life, scrimping and saving at every turn, all in anticipation of this very moment. You're ready to embark upon the longest, permanent, self-imposed period of unemployment in your lifetime. It could last 25, 35, heck, who knows, maybe even 40 years if you keep eating your mueslix. But are you ready to go the distance? How likely are you to remain safely ensconced in that blissful state of willful unemployment? Are there unseen risks that could cut the vacation short, catapulting you back into the workforce at the most inopportune time in your life? Two major risks loom large on the retirement landscape, threatening to derail the retirement plans of even the most diligent and cautious of retirees. Economists and retirement experts have spent years researching math-based strategies that address each risk separately, but they have yet to devise a unified strategy that mitigates the cumulative effects of both risks in a meaningful way. As a result, the vast majority of Americans feel some sense of angst as they venture into their retirement years. The first great retirement risk. If you've read The Power of Zero, you're well acquainted with the first risk of which I speak, tax rate risk. This is a risk worth revisiting because the threat has only compounded since the publication of the updated and revised version of the book in 2018. The risk that tax rates, even 10 years from now, will be dramatically higher is all the more real today than it was even 2 years ago. I've made the case in The Power of Zero, on The Power of Zero show, and in the movie The Power of Zero, The Tax Train is Coming, that because of our nation's skyrocketing debt, higher taxes are inevitable, and we'll be making a visit to your retirement plan in the very near future. For years, the bearer of this bad news was former Comptroller General of the federal government, David Walker. Back in 2009, when the national debt was only $10 trillion, he was running around the country with his hair on fire, making the case that the fiscal condition of our country was precarious at best and destined for bankruptcy at worst. His fiscal wake-up tour took him to college campuses across the country and ultimately landed him on 60 Minutes, where he warned of the need to dramatically reform our nation's entitlement programs to avoid the bankrupting of America. He even made an Oscar-nominated movie about the nation's debt crisis called IOUSA. In 2011, he wrote a CNN op-ed that made the case that tax rates in our country would have to double in order to service the national debt and deliver on entitlement programs such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Well, here we are in 2020, with the publicly stated debt having ballooned to $26.5 trillion, and Medicare and Social Security teetering on the brink of collapse. And all we hear from the media, the government, and a huge swath of financial experts is crickets. It's a truth that's simply too inconvenient to address. As David Walker said, it's the dirty little secret that everyone in Washington knows. And this dirty little secret has enormous repercussions for retirees who've amassed the lion's share of their retirement savings in tax-deferred vehicles like 401ks and IRAs. Fortunately, a few forward-thinking advocates in academia understand the math behind our nation's fiscal woes and have begun to amplify their warning cries to America. One of those lone prophets in the wilderness is Dr. Lawrence Kotlikoff of Boston University. He's the foremost expert on an accountancy method known as fiscal gap accounting, an approach used by nearly every developed country in the world except, wait for it, the United States. Fiscal gap accounting projects a nation's expenses, including benefits they're required to pay by law, over a period of 75 years. It then compares those expenses to the country's anticipated revenue over that same time frame. Is there a difference between what your country is promised in the form of programs, benefits, and services versus what it can actually deliver? If so, then your country has a fiscal gap, and that fiscal gap is your true national debt. In order to quantify the fiscal gap for the United States, Dr. Kotlikoff calculated the net present value of the United States' future financial shortfall, in other words, the difference between what we've promised and what we can actually afford to pay over the next 75 years, and is
Sample complete. Ready to continue?